All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. We'll get started here in just a moment. So many things to talk about. Um, so we'll just get set up here and go live. Double checking some stuff on my end. All right. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you're able to, I appreciate it. As always, you know the drill. You can like and subscribe and all that stuff. You could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate that. You can also go to friendlyatheist.com to subscribe to the newsletter. You could do that for free. Go do that right now if you haven't. We have Den is here to help me out with comment moderation. So if you have questions or comments anytime during this, let him know. He'll make sure I see them in between stories. We got so many things to talk about. I have my computer back, which is lovely. So hopefully I won't have to end things early. And I will also tell you there's a story. I was just telling Den about this before we started. There's one more story I'm not going to get to tonight. I'm going to record it separately tomorrow and I'll put it up on the channel in a couple of days that I think you're also going to really enjoy. So with that said, let's start tonight by talking about what's happening in Minneapolis because it is an intersection of politics and religion and so many of the things we talk about. And if you're not familiar with what has been happening, let me just set the scene here for a little bit, which is that Trump's ICE organization, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement people, they have been going to churches to basically terrorize immigrants. It is what they do, it's what they were hired to do. Anyone they suspect needs to be deported. And there's no shortage of headlines that tell you that is what they're doing. Here's an example of it from the National Catholic Reporter. Viral warnings of planned ICE raids on churches have pastors worried. And look at this. The pastor of an 80-person Latino Pentecostal church got a concerned WhatsApp audio message. The message, allegedly created by an unidentified pastor, circulating among Atlanta area evangelical faith leaders, claimed massive immigration raids would occur there Thursday and Friday. This is from November. But it says church members were soon sending him messages asking what they should do about the potential raids. By that evening, at their teaching and prayer service, he had to address the rumor with his congregation. Stay calm, he told them in Spanish, but take care of yourselves. Don't go out if you don't need to go out. I also want to show you what has been said in one particular lawsuit filed against ICE. Look at this. For example, last month alone, agents seized a man in front of a church near Los Angeles and brandished a rifle at a pastor in the process, detained a grandfather in the same city who was dropping his granddaughter off at a church school, arrested a man outside a church in Oregon, and carried out arrests on 2 Catholic parish properties in Montclair and Highland, California. So this is what ICE has been doing to churches. They have no problem going on church property, terrorizing church members, church pastors. That is what ICE has been doing. And I only want to point out why that is happening when you hear about the story that just took place in St. Paul, Minnesota, just this past week. And the reason this matters is because a lot of those pastors, especially ones with immigrant congregations, they have been telling them, you know what, just stay home. Don't come to church. It is dangerous for you to come to church right now because who knows if ICE is going to bust in. That's the terror that ICE has inflicted on religious communities. Like the Republican Party has made it virtually impossible for those church members to feel safe in a house of worship. And that is partly why last week in St. Paul, a group of about 36 activists in Minneapolis, where an ICE agent murdered an innocent woman, Renee Good, earlier this month, they decided to interrupt services at a Southern Baptist Convention affiliated church, City's Church in St. Paul. They interrupted services there last Sunday morning. They basically stepped into the building, yelled out things like ICE out and justice for Renee Good. And the reason they're going to that particular church is important because they're not just storming some random Christian church. That would be dumb. What's the purpose of that? They went to this particular place because if you go to their website, and I'm showing you their website right here, this is City's Church in St. Paul. You could see that on their list of pastors, we have a whole slew of white men we can choose from. Jonathan Parnell is a name you're going to want to remember in just a second. But also, if you scroll down here, you got this guy over here, David Easterwood. He is one of their many, many white pastors. David Easterwood is one of the pastors on staff. He is also, according to a C-SPAN aired press conference that Kristi Noem was at, he is also the acting field office director for the ICE brigade in St. Paul, Minnesota. So this guy, who I don't know if his day job is terrorizing brown people or just lying to a lot of brown people or whatever, but this guy works as a pastor, and he is not just an ICE agent, he is an ICE field director. And he showed up at a press conference and bragged about all the stuff ICE is doing. So these activists, 36 or so activists, went to his church and they interrupted the services and they chanted, "ICE out, justice for Renee Good." And I will say it was a peaceful protest in the sense that they weren't there to hurt anybody. They did not cause any damage. They were not they were not flipping tables. They literally went there to say their chants. They had it on camera and they left. This was a protest organized by 3 groups: the Racial Justice Network, Black Lives Matter Minnesota, and Black Lives Matter Twin Cities. And just to state the obvious, what happened inside that church on Sunday morning is nothing compared to the actual harm that ICE agents have inflicted upon the city's residents. And yet, the same Justice Department, the Trump-run Justice Department that refused to investigate the officer who murdered Renee Good, despite all the evidence that said he totally murdered her without justification, they are now pretending that this church protest is the greatest crime that has ever happened in the history of man. This is an article from ABC News. Check this out. U.S. Department of Justice Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said her agency is investigating civil rights violations by those people desecrating a house of worship and interfering with Christian worshipers. A house of worship is not a public forum for your protest. It is a space protected from exactly such acts by federal criminal and civil laws, ! She said on social media. Listen. They did not desecrate this house of worship by going in and demanding social justice. Easterwood, the pastor, he desecrated that space when he decided threatening brown people with deportation was an extension of his faith. So don't tell me what the protesters did was a desecration. By the way, you may have seen this in the news as well. The former CNN anchor, Don Lemon, he found out that this protest was happening before it happened. So he documented it with a video camera, basically an on-the-spot reporter. It's the sort of thing reporters do all the time. There were reporters who had advanced knowledge of the Charlottesville protest years ago, the whatever they said, anti-Semitic riot there. The point is, all these right-wing people are like, wait a minute, that's a black guy we do know. We want his head on a platter. So they're furious that Don Lemon knew about this stuff. In any case, I would also argue that the people inside that church were far better served listening to what the protesters had to say than anything they would have heard from the pulpit. I read a Reddit comment that actually said that what the protesters did was actual prophecy, because the definition of the word prophecy is basically spreading the truth of God to people for whom God's word needs a correction. So you are translating the truth of what God is saying to people who need to hear that. That's essentially what these protesters were doing. So call them prophetic. Now, I'm sure there are some people, maybe they're in the comments right now, that are saying that what those protesters did was not smart. They will say that it wasn't strategic, that it plays right into the right wing persecution complex, that this is a narrative. It fuels a narrative in conservative media that protesters are against Christianity. They love that narrative. Here's the thing, though. If you know anything about how the right wing media ecosystem works, you know that those narratives were written long before this protest ever happened. They will use anything to justify the story they want to push, no matter how insignificant it is. If David Easterbrook got a paper cut, they would find a way to blame that on liberals. So I am not worried about the fact that, oh, this doesn't play well in the media. The right wing media was never going to make this look like anything except a travesty. So don't fall for their framing of it. I would argue that the Christians in that church dealt with, at worst, a minor inconvenience. It is nothing compared to the horrors that have been inflicted on the entire lives of the people who live in that city, in that community. And that is happening in part because a pastor at that church is personally leading a group of law-breaking, armed, government-backed mercenaries. And the tactics that are used by the government officials to blow this incident completely out of proportion is not that different from the way white supremacists once described civil rights protesters, right? Oppressive powers are never going to be calm when they're faced with acts of civil disobedience. This is what John Lewis talked about when he said cause good trouble, right? Take people out of their comfort zones. And there are so many examples of movements for justice that were denounced as disorderly, disruptive by the very institutions that just want to maintain the status quo. And honestly, what else do you want the protesters to do at this point? Do you think ICE is listening to them? Do you think if Chuck Schumer writes a letter to Kristi Noem that she's going to back down? No, we've all tried the calm ways of dealing with this, but you are dealing with extremists who are not interested in what anyone else has to say. JD Vance was in Minneapolis today. Do you think he was there to listen to what people who don't like ICE have to say? Or was he there to just amplify whatever rhetoric he wants to push? So conservatives got mad when the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, told ICE to, quote, get the fuck out of my city, as if a curse word was worse than whatever ICE is doing there. They treat everything as a 5-alarm fire, and they escalate in response to anything. So don't believe that Republicans are going to listen to people if only they were peaceful. No, they're not. So maybe this protest finally breaks through, and maybe they will realize that what they are doing is horrific. And if I don't think Republicans are going to figure that out, but maybe people in that church don't realize that their pastor is not one of the good guys, you know? So here's the thing that they are trying to do now. If protests are forbidden in houses of worship, because that's what Harmeet Dillon was saying to ABC News, then surely ICE raids on church property are illegal too, right? But no, that hypocrisy was not addressed by the Trump administration. Neither was the fact that the ICE leader, who has a side gig as this church's pastor, the fact that he has no business telling other people how to live a moral life, because it's not like he's doing that. In fact, look at this. This is also ABC News here. Look at what this pastor was doing. In a January 5th court filing, Easterwood defended ICE's tactics in Minnesota, such as swapping license plates so that ICE cannot be detected, and spraying protesters with chemical irritants. I don't know, where in the Bible do you get that spraying people with chemicals is a good idea? You get the feeling that this guy was cheering on the murder of George Floyd at this point. And by the way, I mentioned that the head pastor at this church was that guy Parnell. According to the website A Public Witness, look at the deal with Parnell here. I wanted to show you this if I can find it all of a sudden. Look at what he's associated with here. Here we go. Yeah, here. Look at the leader of this church, Jonathan Parnell. Parnell also serves on the board of trustees of Bethlehem College and Seminary in Minneapolis, a school founded by Baptist Calvinist preacher John Piper. Last week, a professor at that school used the Sunday service at another church in the area to pray for God to bless ICE and break the teeth of ICE's opponents. That's the pastor of this church. That's who he's affiliated with. He didn't say that. He's affiliated with them. But it goes to show you it's not like Easterbrook's the only bad guy in this mix. Now, Easterbrook, by all accounts, was not even at the church when the protesters came there last week. But I don't think that guy deserves a moment of calm anywhere he goes for the rest of his life. If he goes out to a restaurant, everyone should be screaming at him and making his life a living hell. That's what he deserves for what he is doing. And the people who attend who are part of the congregation here, they should be ashamed of their own complicity here. Because why are you going to a church that involves these pastors who are either directly or indirectly aligned with this terrorist organization? If you go to a church like that, yes, you are part of the problem. And that is essentially what one protester said later on as well. Let me show you this. Yeah, here we go. Look at what one protester said. Her name is Nakima Levy Armstrong. Nakima Levy Armstrong, who participated in the protests, dismissed the potential DOJ investigation as a sham and a distraction from federal agents' actions in Minneapolis, St. Paul. When you think about the federal government unleashing barbaric ICE agents upon our community and all the harm that they have caused, to have someone serving as a pastor who oversees these ICE agents is almost unfathomable to me. Armstrong is an ordained reverend. If people are more concerned about someone coming to a church on a Sunday and disrupting business as usual than they are about the atrocities that we are experiencing in our community, then they need to check their theology and they need to check their hearts. Absolutely, and well said. And I think elsewhere, somewhere, Armstrong added that Jesus went into so-called houses of God and he flipped over tables, so that is what they did. She said, we flipped over a table for truth, justice, and righteousness. And yet, when Harmeet Dillon was doing media interviews with right-wing conspiracy theorists, look at what she was saying about this. This is with Benny Johnson, a plagiarist and notorious liar, Assistant DOJ Attorney General for Civil Rights. Harmeet Dillon, what does she say? The people on the left we're talking about, they're not familiar with what goes on in a house of worship. A lot of them are godless people. What? First of all, most atheists know exactly what goes on inside a church because a lot of us used to go to church. It's why we are atheists today. But also, as I just showed you, Nakima Armstrong is an ordained reverend. She is not an atheist. These are Christians going to protest what this church is doing. So Dillon is just lying. And that protest lasted like 20 minutes. But Dillon and the Trump administration, they are trying to distract from what ICE is doing to people like Renee Good. They took a 5-year-old into their, what did they do? They had a 5-year-old in their power and they used the 5-year-old to get access to the kid's dad. I heard they were driving through intersections where schools were in session this week. And that's besides all the Epstein stuff they want to get everyone's attention off of. But they are now using the protest, the peaceful 20-minute minor inconvenience, as an argument for why they should send more ICE troops to Minneapolis, as if that's going to help the situation. So make no mistake, this is not some attack on Christianity. This is not an attack by the godless. Honestly, I wish we could take credit for this, but we can't. This is a protest against cruelty, and a lot of Christians participated in it and they endorsed it. In fact, a local Lutheran minister wrote this online somewhere: you cannot worship a savior on Sunday who is crucified by a violent state, while the rest of the week acting as a violent agent of an unjust state force who is killing and targeting Americans according to hate. It is deeply ironic that the president of the Southern Baptist Convention's North American Mission Board, he promised to provide protection for their churches if Minnesota leaders won't contain lawlessness. The SBC can't even protect victims of sexual abuse in their own congregations. But no, they got to send protection because some people might walk into church and say, hey, do good. Got to have protection from that. The lawlessness is not coming from those protesters. It's coming from guys like Easterbrook, not from the people trying to help the least of these. Now, you may have seen this today as well. This is a headline from today as I'm making this video. Minnesota church protest leader Nakima Levy Armstrong arrested, say federal officers. And literally, federal officials say they have arrested 3 of the protesters who disrupted a worship service at a Minnesota church this past weekend. Don Lemon is not one of the people they arrested because he's just a journalist, but they did go after 3 of the protest leaders. Now, just because you arrest them doesn't mean they are going to be found guilty of doing anything wrong. And we don't even know yet, I don't think, what they are charged with. But the Department of Justice has said in their press releases and whatnot that they are going to try to use something called the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, the FACE Act, which is actually a law that was written years ago to protect people who need to access abortion clinics. Basically, the law says you can't block them from entering those places. The law says you are not allowed to obstruct, desecrate, or prevent access to abortion clinics. But that law also applies to houses of worship. And that's what the Department of Justice is saying. These people broke that. But I don't know if I buy that ruling. I don't know if I buy that decision. And I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem like those protesters obstructed anyone from going into church. They did not desecrate anything inside the church. They did not prevent access for people who wanted to enter the church. They walked in, they said what they had to say, and they left. I don't think that's a violation of this particular federal law. And keep in mind, there are instances, you could find them online, of right-wing protesters storming into LGBTQ affirming churches and basically doing some version of the same thing as if, I'm not saying those situations are analogous, obviously, but the point is the Justice Department has not gone ever after those right-wing protesters. So we'll see. It's also ironic to me that these same Christians who are in an uproar about what happened at this church, these people would try to deport Jesus if he was walking right in front of them. So to watch conservatives clutch their pearls over temporary chants for social justice while excusing armed agents who are stalking church parking lots and a pastor who encourages them to harass brown people, that means you are excusing right-wing brutality. The protest that happened at this church made some people uncomfortable. That's it. ICE is actively destroying innocent people's lives, and you can guess which one the Trump administration gives a shit about. What happened in that church was peaceful and targeted and in line with Christian theology, and no one's faith was under attack. But you can bet the Republican administration will do everything it can to redirect the public's attention away from what ICE is doing and toward those who are brave enough to confront them. Nothing makes them angrier than protesters who are calling attention to the shit they do. Don't fall for it. They want silence. They want people to just bow down to whatever they do. They don't deserve it. The scandal here is not that some voices were raised for 20 minutes. The scandal is that a pastor actively supporting Trump's reign of terror was preaching from that pulpit in the first place. I think that's it. I'll stop there for now. What questions do you have about this? It's infuriating stuff. Thank you for that donation. The right's hatred of Lemon and Renee Good are at least in part because they're both gay. The churches have always hated us and would erase us if they could. I think there is a point to that. I think that has a lot to do with why. Renee Good, I believe, was a missionary. She was a Christian. And that wasn't enough for them because she was in a same-sex married relationship. She has a kid or two. Like Don Lemon, I believe, is in a relationship as well. So yeah, they hate that these people are gay and not ashamed of it. Thanks for that donation. I think Den will take care of the troll if anyone is in there. She had 3 kids, I am told, Renee. Good. Church is a protected space. Terms and conditions apply, subject to skin color. Oh, don't worry. I got a story about that real soon. I know publicly everyone has to say keep peaceful, but if everyone is going to get government escalation, how soon until people decide to escalate? I know, and that's why you don't want the government making things worse by sending even more goons into a city where they were not asked for, they were not needed. The Trump administration has this thing where they just say every city where like black people, brown people live in, though, and they all happen to be in like blue states, that's where we need to send in the troops. No, you're not helping. You're not making anything better. And in fact, I'm sure someone can find this. If you look at the murder rate per capita, it's not the blue states that are the worst. It is big cities in red states. But you don't see the Trump administration sending ICE agents to any of those places. To play devil's advocate, would Christians doing this in a place of worship that isn't Christian be okay? Or am I missing the bigger picture? Yeah, I mean, if Christians went to a mosque and protested it, the open question is, are we okay with that happening? And again, the question is, what federal crime would they have committed? We can make an argument that what they are doing and why they are doing it matters. I think that's a big part of the issue here. Because knowing conservative Christians, if they went to a mosque, it's not for any justified reason. But if the justification is, hey, your pastor is leading a group of terrorists, I get it. That's not what we're talking about in this situation. But I think everyone's just asking for like a level head here. What do you think is worse? The 20 minutes of interruption of a sermon, which I grant, if I'm a member of that church, I would be annoyed, versus what ICE is doing to the lives of innocent people in that city. Like, it's not just brown people, immigrants who are being harassed here. Schools can't be in session because of what ICE is doing. People don't feel comfortable going to the grocery store because ICE is there. They are terrorizing the whole community, including the straight whites. So, like, I appreciate the devil's advocacy here. I guess my question boils down to, what is it that you are protesting, before I can give you my answer as to whether I think that's justified or not. But also the bigger question is there a federal crime being committed here? Right? Is there any crime being committed here? And I don't trust that Pam Bondi knows that there's a federal crime being committed here. Trump is praying people break the peace before elections. Any reason for the Insurrection Act and the suspension of elections for election security? I agree with you to a large extent there. I think Trump is looking for anything he can do to send more of his thugs and find a reason to cancel the election, do whatever it is. But also, I think he's going to find a reason to do that regardless of what people do. So I don't think this is a question of, watch out, everyone. Maybe it's better to stay quiet because you don't want him going nuclear on everybody. I'm telling you, if someone makes a tweet he doesn't like, he's going to go nuclear on everybody if that's what he thinks he has to do, because he's a maniac and he's surrounded by people who will allow him to be a maniac. All right, I'm jumping to another story in just a second. Give me one moment here. All right. One moment before I get started on this one. All right. I need to show you what is now in front of the Tarrant County Courthouse in Texas. And I know it's in front of this building in Texas because the sheriff's office just took pictures and plastered it on social media. This is what they posted on Facebook. A historic day in Tarrant County as the Ten Commandments monument was unveiled in front of our courthouse. Thank you to our county leaders for making this vision a reality, and to the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office and Fort Worth Police Department for keeping the event safe and secure. History was made today, and we celebrate it together. Look at this ugly ass thing that is now in front of their courthouse. And it's just that. It is just a Ten Commandments monument and literally nothing else. And this standalone monument, it was donated by a group called the American History and Heritage Foundation. And the only reason it's there is to promote Christianity, obviously. And the goal is to make clear that there's only one religion that is valued by the state government. And in case, if you think I'm exaggerating about that, here is what happened at the ceremony that I just showed you a picture of. They had speakers there, not secular speakers. No, they had Kelly Shackelford, who's the head of a right-wing group called the First Liberty Institute. They had Tim Barton, who's the son of Christian pseudo-historian David Barton. And look at what Shackelford said in a statement. Check this one out. Kelly Shackelford, President, CEO, and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute, and member of President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission, attended today's ceremony and released this statement. Displaying the Ten Commandments on public grounds in Texas is consistent with Supreme Court decisions that recognize our religious heritage and the best of the nation's history and traditions. He is wrong. More on that in a second. The Ten Commandments are a symbol of law and moral conduct with both religious and secular significance for all Americans. That's not true. More on that in a second. Those who want to ban such displays are wrong, both under our Constitution and history. A country that doesn't understand its moral and religious traditions and background doesn't know who it is, says the Republican. We applaud the Commissioner's Court for taking this bold step for religious liberty. Uh-huh. By the way, other speakers at that event included Tarrant County Commissioner Matt Krause and County Judge Tim O'Hare. Why is the judge showing up to this? That feels like a conflict. But O'Hare, the judge, he said, this will stand the test of time and be there for many, many years to come. Like, aren't you the sort of person that might need to rule on this in a little bit? There's also a politician who was there. His name is Nate Schatzline. That's his picture right there. Look at what he said. He offered the invocation for the ceremony. The lawmaker and Mercy Culture Church pastor announced in October he would be joining President Donald Trump's National Faith Advisory Board at the end of his term. They're all connected to Trump. And listen to what he says. We don't just make room for you, God. We give you Tarrant County. Father, we rededicate this land, this county. Tarrant County is the Lord's. They're just giving up the land. He single-handedly is like, here, take it, God. This part of Texas is yours. That's who spoke at this celebration. So how did this even happen? What happened is that back in April of last year, the conservative majority on the Tarrant County Council, they voted to accept this monument as a gift. And in defense of it, they just said it's kind of the same as the monument that is outside the state capitol. And look at what Matt Krause, who is the county official, look what he said at the time. There is a Ten Commandments monument. This isn't a quote, I should say. There is a Ten Commandments monument on the Texas Capitol grounds, which the Supreme Court ruled in 2005 did not violate the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment. Krause said the monument donated to Tarrant County will be nearly identical to the one on the state's Capitol grounds. Not even close to being true. Let's discuss this. In 2005, there were two Ten Commandments cases that went to the Supreme Court. They were both decided on the same day. The one involving Texas said we have a Ten Commandments monument outside the Texas state capitol. Is that okay? And the Supreme Court said 5-4, yes, that is okay, but only because surrounding the Texas Capitol are a lot of monuments dedicated to the law. So they have a bunch of monuments. Maybe I'm making this up, but they have one dedicated to the Declaration of Independence and the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights. So it's part of a larger display. So we say that if you want the commandments as part of this big display, that is okay. The Supreme Court also decided that in that other case, there was a standalone Ten Commandments monument outside of a courthouse in Kentucky. And they said, wait, you just have the Ten Commandments and it's not surrounded by other things? That is absolutely illegal. And they voted 5-4 that one was illegal. So when Matt Krause is saying, well, our monument is just like the one outside the Texas Capitol, so it's the same thing. No, it's not. And I'm not a lawyer, and I know it's not. The people speaking at this invocation, at this dedication ceremony, are lawyers, and they're like, yeah, it's cool. It's fine. No one will ever notice. It's not the same thing. It is a standalone Ten Commandments monument outside Tarrant County. It's not okay. It is illegal by Supreme Court precedent. So these people are just straight up lying about it. So all these Christians in support of this monument, they know damn well what they are doing. So they put up this monument. They know how this is going to play out. Now that the monument is up, now they're going to be sued over it. People can't sue in the past because, you're getting a gift. It's not even up there. We don't know what it's going to look like. It's kind of hard to sue. But now it's up there. So now someone is going to file a lawsuit against this, and the Christian right wants it. They know it's going to happen. They have right-wing lawyers ready to defend this in court, and because they are conservative Christians, they are lying about what the monument represents. Because what they don't want to tell you is, we just want to promote Christianity, and this is the easy, notable way to do that. Instead, they are doing what Kelly Shackelford did, which is, what do they say? Back to this statement here. Shackelford said, this is a symbol of law and moral conduct with both religious and secular significance. He doesn't say it's about Christianity. He doesn't say it's for Christians. He says the rules are not about Christianity. It's about law and morality. And who wants to hear what these things say? Everybody, secular people, religious people too. He's straight up lying about who this is for and why it's up there. And it's such an obvious lie that when Republicans made similar arguments in defense of a law to put the Ten Commandments posters in schools in places like Texas, a federal judge not only struck it down, he said, quote, there are ways in which students could be taught any relevant history of the Ten Commandments without the state selecting an official version of scripture, approving it in state law, and then displaying it in every classroom on a permanent basis. Yeah. Listen, if Christians want to put up a sign that says, don't kill people, okay, let's have that debate. But that's literally the only thing on there that is secular law, and you could take it out of the context of religion. If you want to argue kids should respect their parents, I'm sorry, that's not a law. Some parents are shitty. You don't have to respect them. And think about the other commandments that are there, like 1 through 4 in the King James Version. You can't have any gods before like the one true God. Nothing secular about that. You can't worship false idols. Nothing secular. You can't take God's name in vain. Yes, I can. God damn it. Who cares? You must rest on the Sabbath day. I can do what I want. Even saying you can't have sex with people you're not married to, or you can't covet what your neighbors have, those might be moral arguments, but those are not laws where you can be fined for the crime. So, like, most of the commandments have nothing to do with the secular law. I know you know this. I know you've seen the George Carlin bit. Like, but that's the point. It's about promoting Christianity. It is not about promoting the law, because if you want to say don't steal, don't kill, fine. That is not the sign they are putting up there. Also, they're in Texas. The guy running for governor of Texas right now as a Republican is their current Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And if you've seen Ken Paxton's name in the news for anything, it's because he probably broke all of these commandments. And the only question is, how many at once? His wife divorced him on biblical grounds. Like, Ken Paxton has violated every one of these rules. I'm assuming he's killed people. I don't know anymore. But these Republicans are arguing we need this to remind people of what morals they should have. Anyway, let's go vote for Ken Paxton. He's our guy. These people are such hypocrites. I do appreciate that there is a group of religious people who form the Faith and Justice Coalition of Tarrant County. And look at what they wrote in a statement opposing the display. Our opposition is rooted in both constitutional principle and religious conviction. A courthouse, an institution entrusted with justice and equal treatment under the law, must serve all members of the community without religious preference or endorsement. By displaying a monument bearing the King James interpretation of the Ten Commandments, the county elevates a sacred text associated with a particular religious tradition, namely Christianity, above others. This sends an exclusionary message to the many people in our community who practice different faiths or no faith at all, including Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, indigenous spiritual communities, humanists, atheists, and others. In a place where residents come seeking justice, no one should feel like an outsider because of their beliefs. Like, amen to that. That's amazing. Look, none of this is about history or morality or the law. This is purely about power. Christians in Tarrant County want to make clear that their religion and only their religion is valued in civic life. And if the Constitution says that's not permitted, and the Supreme Court says that's not permitted, these people would rather rip up the Constitution and make a special plea to Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito saying, come on. And it's so unnecessary too. Like, there's nothing about justice or public safety in Tarrant County that requires anybody to follow the commandments or abide by some religious rules. Like, courts are there to implement secular law through logic and reason. The Ten Commandments goes against everything you want from a courthouse. So, like, what's the monument going to do? Is it going to help judges make better decisions? No. One of the judges in that area just went to the dedication ceremony. All this does is send a message to non-Christians that they're not welcome here. That's all this is about. Their government doesn't see them as equal. Honestly, I think if I were a donor or a lawyer involved in this whole charade, I would argue, hey, you guys, we need to make the Establishment Clause violations here a little more subtle. Like, maybe we do put up some other monuments around this one. Maybe we do put other things on the other sides of the plaque to make it clear it's not just about the commandments. Maybe we don't just invite Christian zealots to the dedication ceremony. But they didn't. Like, they made it so obvious that what they are doing is illegal. And honestly, the Supreme Court, I don't think they want to take up cases like this where the right thing to do is a little too obvious. They would rather find some gray area and rule in a way that helps conservatives. They don't want to just take a thing that says, we don't like brown people and rubber stamp it. They would rather find something that just allows people to be racist. You know what I mean? So I don't think this is a good case for them when they get sued over this. I think if there's one lesson we learn here, it's that conservative Christians really don't give a damn about the law. That's why they're doing this. It's a show of power. They're basically declaring victory over the stuff that happens inside that courthouse. Doesn't apply to them. They have a different code of ethics they live by, which is none. You know, at the bottom of that monument, by the way, there was another Bible verse if you zoom in really close, and it says, it's from Proverbs chapter 14, and it says, righteousness exalts a nation. And you know they haven't read the Bible, because if they looked at the rest of Proverbs 14, they would have found a different verse that says, a false witness will utter lies. And that verse, I think, describes the very Christians promoting this monument better than anything that is etched into it. All right, I'm going to stop there for that story. What questions we got here? Oh, thanks for that donation. I am the Lord your God. Sure, secular. Yeah, I'm sure that's a secular statement right there. I'm sure Muslims love it. If it's religious too. That monument looks like a live, laugh, love gravestone. Like they're so generic and they all use the same Charlton Heston promotional tools for the Ten Commandments movie. They all use the same template and it's ugly. Like the formatting is bad. I'm mad at the kerning. It's huge. How did Moses carry that down a mountain? I know. How did he carry like that plus another half monument, if my history is correct? The Republican Party is a cult right now. And that's probably the best thing you could say about them. I'm glad they have a hobby. I just wish it wasn't harming everyone they can find. And like Hemant, why should the Ten Commandments be the standard? What about the laws of Buddhism? Right. The Satanic Temple has their 7 fundamental tenets. Right? Like other religions have codes of ethic, and it's not always 10, and it's not the same 10. While we're talking about George Carlin, he's made this point before too. We have our Bill of Rights with our 10 amendments to the Constitution. Other countries have a Bill of Rights with far more things in it. Like people have different ideas of what constitutes, what needs to be protected, what needs to be treated as a rule we should all follow, etc. All right, I'm going to jump to a different story. 1 second here. All right. This story I'm about to tell you is just wild. I will show you the video in just a second. You're not going to like the video. I'm going to show it to you anyway. What you need to know about it is it involves a guy who is just straight up racist. Not like I'm calling him racist. I mean, he calls himself racist. He's a right-wing extremist. His name is Mike, and I cannot confirm his last name at the moment because no one really has printed his last name anywhere, which is interesting. But what you need to know about him is 1, he is a Catholic, and 2, he loves Nick Fuentes. And if you don't know who that is, take me with you to wherever you're at. He is basically this openly racist, white nationalist sort of figure on the right who has the attention of both Donald Trump and Kanye. But the followers of Nick Fuentes are known as groypers, and Mike is a groyper. He talks more about Nick Fuentes than he ever will about Jesus. So he recently announced to the world that he went to church and he refused to accept the Eucharist on his tongue, the wafer on his tongue. He refused to take it for a reason you're about to find out. And instead, he chose an alternative path. Let me show you the video because it is disturbing.
Okay, well, I did a bad thing in church today. I refused to receive the Eucharist from an Indian woman. I was supposed to go to her. She was in my aisle, but across the church was the white priest. So I walked across all the pews and received it from him for fear that I might get fecal matter on my Eucharist receiving it from an Indian woman. Plus, I'm not going to receive it from anyone who's non-white. Sorry. Considering what's happening in the U.S. and in the world with our replacement, I'm not doing that. I guess I'll go confess this to my priest, but I'll continue doing it. That's the compromise.
So yeah, that's what he said, and then posted to the internet like it was a totally normal thing to say. That, I think, surprised me more than anything. So there's a lot of things to discuss here. One is there's just this nasty stereotype against an Indian woman. He then freely admits he's just not going to take communion from someone who's not white, like just straight up putting the racism out there. He alluded to the great replacement theory, which is a thing Nick Fuentes has pushed for a long while now. It is a white supremacist conspiracy theory that says Caucasians are being systematically outnumbered by people of color, and therefore they are losing their power. And I don't know, ... this is bad for white people somehow. And what's weird to me about this particular video, I mean, I will say none of it really surprised me. I expect this from conservatives at this point. What is bizarre is he opens up by saying, I did a bad thing. Like he knows it's bad. He said the word sorry as if he knew this is something you need to apologize about. Like he knows racism is a sin. He probably knows Catholic doctrine condemns racism, but also he's not going to stop being racist. At the end of that video, he also said it wasn't that big of a deal because he would just go to confession and be like, I did a bad thing. I sinned. So forgive me, Father. And I think in his mind, he'll say a couple of Hail Marys, all is forgiven. And then he can just go right back to being a racist. The problem is, like, I know I'm not a Catholic, but I'm pretty sure Catholic doctrine says if you confess a sin, the only way you can actually atone for it is if you sincerely mean to repent. And this guy is making it very clear he's not taking it back. He's saying like, hey, Father, will you forgive me for I have sinned? And then he hopes Father forgives him. And then he's going to go right back out sinning again, which means the confession wouldn't count. And it's funny to me that that is the case because when Mike posted this on social media, and this is what he posted, look at this. I refuse to receive the Eucharist from an Indian at Mass today. Just showing his whole ass for the world to see. But if you scroll down here, there is a community note on social media, and look what this thing says. Contrary to the impression given, contrary to the impression given here, a Catholic who confesses a sin with no intention of avoiding it in the future will not be forgiven it. A person guilty of a grave sin must make a confession and receive absolution before receiving the Eucharist. Not to do so is a grave sin. So, like, this dude doesn't even understand the very basics of his own theory here. I will say, in response to that video, the responses are thankfully, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's not like everyone is chiming in saying, yeah, you did the right thing. No, they're basically calling him out for the racism, but they also called out a whole bunch of other things. For example, the whole idea of taking communion is to celebrate Jesus as one body. So what this guy is doing by like, I'm not taking communion from you, I'm taking it from him, that violates the entire spirit of the ritual. Another thing, does this guy know that Jesus wasn't white? He's like a brown-skinned Palestinian, according to the story. So that doesn't make sense. Also, why was he filming that while driving? Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. And does he seriously think, he said this Indian woman, I want to avoid the fecal matter. Gross stereotype. But also, does he think men wash their hands more than women? after going to the bathroom? I'm just telling you, I have not found that to be the case. I don't know what this guy does, but okay. And by the way, it's not just random people saying all this stuff. Prominent Catholics have called out this guy. Trump supporting conservatives have called out this guy, which is hilarious given how much racism emanates from this administration. But in case you're wondering what are this guy's politics, I will have you know he is fine with Trump in general. He is not a fan of J.D. Vance. This is what he said uh, before they won the election. A Peter Thiel protege with an Indian wife and a Hispanic for the presidential ticket when Marco Rubio was still being considered for vice president. No thanks, said Mike. What else has Mike said? Oh, this is another one of his tweets and videos. Catholic congregations are getting too diverse. Yeah, that's the problem with Catholicism. Send the spotlight team on that one. And maybe the funniest thing about Mike to me is that he actually is kind of infamous because in October of last year, he went viral for something else he posted. I just want to show you the metrics. 28 million views on this, 269,000 likes, 15,000 retweets. Those are big numbers. What did he actually tweet that got all this attention? He tweeted to Chipotle. Chipotle, I ordered these burritos 15 minutes apart from the same store today. The one on the left I ordered in person, and it's twice the size as the one on the right online order. My online order is always significantly smaller every time. Stop ripping us off. And I find this funny because, one, like, you have your burrito. Are you doing this for the social clout or something? Are you ordering 2 burritos so you could post about it online? And also, why are you ordering online when you were already in the store? That doesn't make any sense. But also, why is this racist going to Chipotle, a store that sells Mexican-ish sort of stuff? I don't know. He loves Mexican food. He hates Mexican people. Interestingly enough, I saw a couple of articles about Mike and his racism and what people said about him. One thing they never pointed out, besides his last name, is where does this guy go to church? Is it possible we are all just being trolled here or something like that? And it turns out Mike's not very good at covering his tracks, because I went down the rabbit hole that I don't think I saw a lot of people do, because I really want to know everything about Mike at this point. And what I found is that he has posted a video way back in the day where he said last year he attends St. Elizabeth Roman Catholic Church in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. Yep, he just bragged about that one right there. And when I went to their social media page, they do not mention Mike. They do not mention this incident. It seems like no one has really connected the fact that Mike the racist attends St. Elizabeth Roman Catholic Church in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. I did reach out to them. I emailed them. I'm like, hello, I would like to know what you have to say about Mike. Is this racism what you preach at this particular church? Do you have anything to say in response to Mike's racism? What are you doing to make sure his racism doesn't infect the rest of the church? Those are some of those questions I asked. Some of them I wanted to ask. You won't be surprised they did not respond to me. But hey, if anyone is curious, St. Elizabeth Roman Catholic Church in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer all of your questions if you have them. I do have to say that obviously this guy doesn't represent other Catholics. I have a lot of problems with Catholicism, but racism isn't one of them ones on the list, right? This guy is an anomaly. Like, the church is anti-abortion, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-birth control. They're not racist. They have a lot of brown, Hispanic, Indian members of the church. Honestly, if they kicked out all their brown members, the church would be decimated at this point. A lot of Asian people too. But like, I think the thing that I still am thinking about days later is that Mike seems to understand the difference between right and wrong. He just doesn't care. Nothing about his religion taught him that he should choose the moral path, even when he knows which path that is. Like, this guy would rather listen to Nick Fuentes than any priest. And I think that's the sort of power that a lot of priests have been complaining about in recent years. And I'm paraphrasing here, but they have said things like, I can preach about Jesus all day, every day, and now my congregation is calling me and Jesus woke. And I only see them for like an hour on a Sunday. Meanwhile, they get Joe Rogan like 3 hours every day. They get Nick Fuentes every day. They get these right-wing crazy people every day. And some priests cannot compete with that. So this guy is proudly racist. He posts about it online like he's proud of it. And his church apparently condones this bigotry because, as far as I know, they're not kicking him out of the church. Like, what good is your moral country club if this guy is a member of it? What does it say about Catholics that this guy is allowed to be in the church? I don't think it's enough to just condemn this and move on, because like a lot of churches embrace open bigots like Mike. And if it's not a Catholic church, it's a mega church. They have plenty of mega supporting people as part of the congregation. Who's calling out the hate? Why aren't these pastors calling out the hate at every turn, in every form? Because if that doesn't happen, guys like Mike are going to think my church is fine with what I do, so I'm going to keep doing it. And they're going to use their religion to launder the hate that they espouse. That's the fear I have here. All right, I will stop there with this story. What questions do you have here? Oh, when I heard of this story, I thought he was a 20-something-year-old, but no, this guy is at least in his 40s. Yeah, very much so. This is an older racist, not just some edgy 14-year-old trying to do this for shits and giggles or something. Oh, thanks for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that. I don't know if you can hear the vent going on in the background. I was afraid to turn it off today because the temperature where I'm at is like below 0 tonight. And I'm like, if I turn off the heat, all my pipes are going to freeze and everything will blow up. I have some bad news about Jesus for you. Yeah, Mike, he brown. I look more like Jesus than you do. He's so proud of it. Why? For the metrics, for the clout online, for the likes on Twitter with his racist base. If Christians are good at anything, it's turning people away from it. They hate on others, hold people to an impossible standard, and get caught doing the most dangerous things. Yeah, and it's sad because there are so many good Christians who don't do any of that stuff. But I would firmly argue that Christianity today is being defined by the bigots, by the haters, by the hypocrites. And what are you going to do about that if you're part of the club and you're like, I'm not that. I don't like it either. It's like, yeah, well, too bad. Your job is to keep calling them out. And to be clear, plenty of Christians do. But it's like, yeah, that's what you got to do. That's your lot in life. Go call out these bigots. Make it clear that they do not represent you. File the lawsuits against these groups. Call out the churches by name and the pastors by name. What church? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me make it clear in case people didn't hear. Mike attends St. Elizabeth Roman Catholic Church in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, which is something I know because he said as much in a video that he posted online last year. Thanks. I almost forgot to mention it. Leave faucets at a slow drip if you are getting near 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Thank you. Yeah, don't want to leave them just empty and freezing. That would be bad. All right. I'm going to jump to a different story. 1 second. I have no idea for this one. All right. Let's talk about a new survey that just came out. And here's the gist of the survey. If I asked you about like the major Latin American countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru. What do you think is the dominant religion in all 6 of those countries? And I would think, I think it's obvious, at least if you have some familiarity with these countries. Catholicism, I would think, I would guess, would be the dominant religion. And yet, according to this new survey from the Pew Research Center, it seems that people in those countries are ditching Catholicism faster than ever before. In fact, the Catholic share in all 6 of those countries over the past decade has dropped by double digits in just about all of those countries. And there's no indication this drop is going to end anytime soon. So check out these numbers right here. The Catholic share of Latin America populations has fallen since 2014, basically. And look at the share. This is the share of Catholics in all of these countries. In Argentina, over the past decade, it has dropped 13 points from 71% to 58%. In Brazil, it's gone from 61 down to 46%. More than half of Brazil is now non-Catholic. More than half of Chile is non-Catholic. Colombia's dropped from 79 to 60, a drop of 19 points. And then here, Mexico has dropped to 67%, and Peru has dropped to 67%. That right there is the lowest drop, and that's still 9%. So these countries are becoming less Catholic in big numbers, and that is amazing. And if you're wondering, okay, they're not Catholic, but maybe for whatever reason, culturally speaking, maybe they're leaving the Catholic Church and joining another church. And the answer to that is no, very much not true at all. In fact, if you look at the numbers that the Pew Research Center provided, all of those declines map just about perfectly with the rise, the corresponding rise in the religiously unaffiliated people in those same countries. So Peru, for example, saw an 8% increase of NONES, nuns, over the past decade. Colombia jumped up 17%. There are now more religiously unaffiliated adults than Protestants in Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. That is just wild to me. I don't think I would have guessed that at any point. And all of this is such a far cry. I want to show you this chart. It's incredible. Obviously, the research, like, do we know how many Catholics were in these countries 100 years ago? No, we don't have really good data on that, but there are estimates. And I got to show you this right here. Look at these estimates. I'm just going to go to Argentina. According to the World Religion Database estimates, about, I'm going to scroll down here. In 1900, Argentina was like 97% Catholic, estimated. In 1970, they were 90% Catholic. And now, what you're seeing in blue over here are the more complex statistical methods to try to get more accurate information. But using the newer numbers, we are just finding this dramatic drop. It used to be all Catholic, and now it's, in some cases, less than half Catholic. And I'll zoom out here so you could see the rest of these. This is happening across the board for all of these countries, including Peru right over here. But look at this. Going back over 120 years, you just see from like the 90s, the percentiles in the 90s, and now it's like less than half. It's such a big change. I have to imagine it's a huge cultural change in those countries as well, where they are now going from, at one point you could just assume someone was Catholic. I would assume now that's no longer the case. You are better off assuming someone's not Catholic. So that's a big change of pace as well. Now, if you're wondering, what about the Hispanic population in the United States? Are we seeing the same trends in the US? And the answer is, yeah, we are. We are. Look at this. This is since 2010. This is the religious identity of Hispanic adults by year. And you could see in the red at the very top, Hispanic Americans used to be 67% of the population. Now it's 42%. And you could see that as the red is falling, look at what's happening to the religiously unaffiliated number. It is going up and up and up. So now religiously unaffiliated right over there is at 27%, but that has gone up from like 10. So we have grown about 3 times in size, percentage-wise, among Hispanic Americans, while Catholics have gone from 67% to 42%. Huge drop in the United States as well. Okay, so the obvious question then is, why the hell is this happening? What is going on in these countries that is making people say, I got to get the hell out of the Catholic Church? And the Pew Research Center did not go into the whys, but we can take some guesses, right? Like, the answers are all varied, but they include sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church, coming to terms with reality, as many of us do when we reach the age of like 7, opposition to the church's anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-birth control rhetoric. I mean, Mexico has a female president. I imagine the Catholic Church's stance on what women should do with their bodies doesn't go over well as it used to. Like, what we could say is that the rise of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, in Latin America is directly coming from people who leave Catholicism, and that's because they are leaving Catholicism for reasons that make them think, I don't want to join a different religion. I want to leave organized religion altogether. And that is a key phrase, organized religion, because when it comes to the religiously unaffiliated, to be clear, a lot of these people still believe in God. They just do not want to be a part of the Catholic Church. In fact, look at one last thing. Let me show you 2 other things here. I'll just say this one out loud. But according to the Pew Research Center, the percentage of people who believe in God in those 6 countries I mentioned earlier, they hover between 89% in Peru to 98% in Brazil, which is wild to me. So again, in Brazil, the percentage of people who are Catholic is now 46%. The percentage of people in Brazil who believe in God is 98%. So that means there is this huge gap of people who are like, I believe in some higher power, but I'm not going to a Catholic church anymore. Like, they believe in the supernatural. They just don't want to do it through the Catholic Church. That said, the survey also found that a lot of those people don't pray regularly. Only 76% of people in Brazil pray regularly. And I know this was hard for me to make sense of too. So you have like fewer than half of them are Catholic, but 76% of them still pray to God, but 98% of them believe in God, which means there's a huge group of people who believe in God, but don't pray to God, and an even smaller percentage who go to the church, at least the Catholic Church. It's wacky. The other thing I wanted to show you here that I found interesting is that I told you I don't think these numbers are just going to stay where they are at. I think they're going to keep falling. And the reason I say that is because Pew broke it down by ages. And I'll just look at Argentina because it's at the top here. Look at this. In Argentina, just look at the Catholic numbers. Among people who are older than 50, 67% of Argentinians are Catholic. But among people ages 18 to 24, 47% are Catholic. A 20-point drop from oldest to youngest Argentinian. And I mean, there's a little change there when it comes to Protestantism. Like, younger people are more Protestant than their counterparts who are older. However, when it comes to the religiously unaffiliated, 18% of people older than 50 have no religious affiliation, but 32% of Argentinians who are under 34 or 35 are religiously unaffiliated. You can just see there's a 14-point difference between oldest and youngest in terms of religiously unaffiliated. And if you look at this number right here in bold, in all these countries, Colombia, there is a 23% difference between oldest and youngest for religiously unaffiliated. What do you think happens when the oldest people die out? They're going to be replaced by younger people who are less inclined to be part of an organized religion, which means the drop in Catholicism, the rise in religiously unaffiliated is going to go up some more. So these trends are going to continue for a really long time. And I don't think any of this should be surprising at a time when conservative Christians, at least in the United States, they have allied themselves with the Republican Party, ruled by a demagogue who uses slurs to describe Mexican immigrants. He brags about deportations. He threatens to steal Venezuela's oil. He lays claim to the entire Western Hemisphere. He cut USAID assistance to Latin American countries. He imposes tariffs on a whim, and he bails out dictators. Why would anyone like what conservative Catholics, conservative Christians in the United States are promoting? And they're defended. I mean, Trump is defended all the time by his conservative Christian allies. So if religion is supposed to offer moral clarity and it leads those people to support Donald Trump, who is a disaster for Latin America, then maybe the religion is broken. That's my theory. Fight me on that. So in a way, I think this shows how a generation of Latin Americans raised under Catholicism, I think they've grown disillusioned about where it has taken them. I mean, so no wonder they don't want to pay allegiance to it anymore. And when you consider how many millions of people raised in Catholicism are now walking away, specifically to no religious affiliation at all, I think that shows you just how much the Catholic Church has failed those people, because they're not seen as the moral clarity institution. They're seen as the hypocrites and the bigots and the people with bad policies. And if the Catholic Church is not going to do more when faced with the easiest moral questions of our time, I cannot imagine anyone wants to stay in there for very long. And you could see a lot of people in Latin America in those 6 countries, they believe in God. They just don't want to be part of the Catholic Church. They don't have trust that that institution is the best conduit to talk to God. I mean, that's a start. I hope that's the first of many dominoes to fall when it comes to their theology. So, I mean, I hope we see the same trend happen in the US. I think we are seeing signs of that. But I hope if there's one good thing Donald Trump can do, it's that he can take conservative Christians down with him whenever all of this ends. All right, I will pause there for this story. What other questions we got here? There's an increase of nuns and a decrease of nuns. I am mad at you for the fact that I didn't think of that first. It was right there. Well done. I'm Costa Rican, and here most of the people I know don't go to any church and never discuss or mention religion. Well, there you go. Beautiful place, by the way. I have had a chance to visit. It's gorgeous. Wonder if atheism is on the rise there. You know, interestingly enough, the Pew Research Center did not break up the religiously affiliated numbers into atheism, agnosticism, etc. Or maybe I missed it, but I don't think they did. I have to imagine atheism is on the rise, but not that much. Same in the US, by the way. Atheism isn't necessarily growing that big, but religiously unaffiliated grows by a lot. It's becoming difficult to maintain information bubbles and cults. Too much digital connection and information. It's good to see. Yeah, I mean, I've heard this anecdotally, people hear more about from people who are critical of the church and of politics and whatnot. And so it's becoming a little easier to know you're not alone, which is nice. I wonder if theism, devoid of organized religion or church attendance, erodes and becomes atheism over time for individuals. Again, I'm speaking anecdotally, but that is what I have found in a lot of cases. People are like, okay, I don't believe in this stuff, so I'm going to leave my church, but I still believe in something. And then later on, they realized, I don't believe in that something either. Maybe I believe in some supernatural stuff. I like horoscopes, but I'm not big on God. And then eventually they realized it's all bullshit. So, like I said, first domino to fall, may there be many more after that. I travel in China a lot. I see more churches, not sure of denominations there every year. And again, I'm ignorant on this, but I feel like it's the opposite there, right? They're more, they crack down more on churches over there. So you can only have more churches because it's really hard to get fewer churches at this point in China. St. Elizabeth in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, is where that last guy went to. Yes. All right. Like, and subscribe. Very good. Let me move to a different story here. One moment. "50-50 shot. What do we got? Aha. All right. Let's talk about this over here. This is a story I have talked about before in some capacity, but this is now happening in Ohio, and I wanted to bring it up for those of you who live there or are curious about what's happening there. So, a few months ago, the Republican majority Ohio Senate, they passed a bill. It was a 24-9 vote requiring public schools to teach middle school and high school students that there is a proper order to do things in if you want to lead a successful life. And this bill passed the Senate. It now sits in the Republican led Ohio House Education Committee. But I want to show you the crux of this bill. This is Senate Bill 156. And here is the main part of it. It is called the Success Sequence Bill. And here's the main part. As used in this section, success sequence means a three-pronged framework for youth and young adults based on research from diverse institutions that individuals, who's going to have the best success in life? Individuals who complete at least a high school education, obtain full-time work, and marry before having children. Sometimes the having children is a fourth prong, but okay, marry before having children are overwhelmingly less likely to live in poverty in adulthood. That is the success sequence that they want to teach at public schools. The guy who is behind this bill is this dude right here. That's Senator Al Catrona. And I mentioned this before. First of all, this guy looks like he was built for success. But when I talked about it last time, this success sequence sort of bill, it is drafted by the Heritage Foundation, which is the same group that made Project 2025. And the guy, Catrona here, who sponsored this bill, his other priorities have included creating Charlie Kirk Memorial Day and book banning in various forms. So that's what this guy does when, he's not being successful. So the problem with the bill, obviously, is that the three prongs are not keys to success. They are ingredients that might help. But obviously, plenty of people skip some of those things or they do them out of order and they do great in life. And there are plenty of people, you find them on Christian snark forums, who do those things in that order, and they're losers. And they don't have a lot of money. That's not why they're losers, but they don't have a lot of money either. Like, they have miserable lives. So you could do the success sequence and still not be successful, depending on what metric you want to use. That's why this is so misguided. It's not that going to college is bad or getting married and having kids is bad. It's that not doing those things doesn't necessarily explain why you might not make as much money or be as healthy. Like, the root causes of poverty are completely ignored here. For example, and I think I mentioned this last time too, let's say you graduate high school. Let's say you get an apprenticeship. Let's say you marry your high school sweetheart when you are 19, and then you impregnate her. In that order, if you do those things, you are following the success sequence perfectly. But You don't have a lot of life experience. You barely know yourself. Your brain is not fully formed yet. You don't have any money saved up in case of emergencies. You don't know if the job you are training for now is going to be around in the future or that you're going to like it in the future, etc. So, following the success sequence doesn't mean you're going to be successful. At the same time, imagine this: pretend you're a young woman. You stay single, you focus on your career. Let's say you spend your 20s and 30s dating and having sex with whoever you want because you can. Let's say you are traveling, but saving money along the way. And then let's say you're in your late 30s, you get married to a guy who has a child from a previous marriage. I would argue that that woman is way better positioned to have a successful future because so many of the concerns you might have in life, money, health, self-awareness, are satisfied. She knows who she is. She knows what she wants out of life. The 19-year-old who gets married is not, generally speaking. And I know there are exceptions to this in all directions. A lot of this depends on how much support do you have from your extended family? What is the job market like? What hopes and dreams do you have for your future? But like, that's the point. There are so many paths to success. There isn't one. And yet this bill says, nope, there's one path to success and you got to do it this way. That is, it also happens to coincide with what they teach you in any church that promotes purity culture, right? Like that's the same sort of vibe. Don't do anything before you're like of age, then get married real fast and then spit out all the babies. Like, no, that's a horrible idea. And along the way, this bill, it absolutely neglects the underlying reasons someone may or may not be successful. For example, if you grow up in a wealthy family and you don't have medical issues, you will probably avoid poverty no matter what the hell you do. Doesn't matter if you go to college. Doesn't matter if you get married. You're going to be okay, generally speaking. And here's the other thing I want to show you about this bill in Ohio. Look at what it says in one other section of the bill right over here. The Department of Education and Workforce shall develop standards and a model curriculum about the success sequence for grades 6 through 12, which shall include evidence identified using the best research methods available, describing the positive personal and societal outcomes associated with the success sequence. What happens if the evidence says the success sequence is wrong? Because guess what? That's what the evidence shows. Then what? Like this bill doesn't say, it just says, let's find some evidence that points to the conclusion I want it to point to, which is not how evidence works at all. But that is in the bill too, and it's deeply stupid right there. When they asked people about this bill back in October when it was going through the Senate, look at what one Democrat said. State Senator Kent Smith, a Euclid Democrat, read from a separate study that poked holes in the success sequence research. He noted that not everyone graduates from good schools. Many face racism and other structural issues in life, and it overstates the importance of marriage. The success sequence misrepresents values among low-income individuals. Research and surveys show that poor Americans generally value work, education, and marriage just as much as those in the middle class. Their behavior is not a rejection of these ideals, but a reflection of their limited availability to act on them due to systematic barriers. And I appreciate that he said that. I think he is spot on. Another opponent of the bill who spoke at a committee hearing said this too. Ohio remains the only state in the nation without statewide health curriculum standards. So they don't even do statewide health standards, but this Republican wants to do a statewide graduate and then get married, then pop out the babies. They don't do health, but they will do that. So instead of addressing actual problems, they're doing this patchwork approach that is full of gaping holes. Now, the last time I talked about the success sequence, it involved a similar bill in in Tennessee. That's where this is passed. And there, the justification for the bill was all kinds of faulty logic overall. I won't repeat everything I said there, But they went through all of this there, and the Republicans in Tennessee just ignored all those arguments. Um, that bill in Tennessee also said that kids who were not raised in a home with married parents were twice as likely to end up in jail or prison before reaching 30 years of age. And they use that to justify why you got to get married early. But like that points to stability in your home. If you live with a single mother who has a good job and is home for you at night, you are better off, I would argue, than a married couple that fights all the time and hates each other. That's what stability is like. You know what I'm saying? And these bills ignore all of that because they think the Bible says there's only one path to success. I don't know if there's anything else I want to say that I didn't say with that Tennessee video, which I will link below if you want to see it. I think maybe the most surprising thing about this bill in Ohio is that it didn't say anything about you have to attend church. I figured they would have tossed that one in there, but they did not. Because plenty of conservatives have promoted studies that say people who attend church make more money, have fewer health problems, and that's also faulty logic, but I'm surprised they didn't sneak that into this bill. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you live in Ohio, the Ohio House has not passed this bill yet. There is still time to contact your representatives and tell them not to vote for this. It's a horrible idea. So just wanted to put that out there. What questions we have here? Not only that, it also matters who you marry. Marry an abusive spouse or someone with a gambling addiction or alcoholism, and success is not in your cards. Right. Again, it goes back to stability. Some couples are more stable than others. And I would argue the older you get, the easier it is to figure out what you need to make sure you're in a stable relationship. 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and I'm speaking for myself here, I don't think I would have really known what I needed in a relationship at that age. I still don't understand why they think someone is miserable because they didn't have kids. I don't have any kids, and I am not miserable. I'm happily single, and people in my family call me miserable. Yeah, they want kids. They just don't want to live with them in your family, and you're depriving them of that. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, I know plenty of people without kids. They're doing fine. They know exactly what they are missing. And if they want to spend time with kids, they'll go to someone else's house. Kids are great in doses, I say as a parent of kids. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This assumption that you got to have kids is ridiculous. Not having kids, thank you for pointing this out. I forgot to. Not having kids is not always a choice. It's even less of a choice as healthcare is restricted. That's right. This bill would suggest that a Christian couple that follows the rules and does everything that they want you to do, but for whatever reason, they cannot biologically have kids, they want you to believe that you are not successful. You have not done everything God wants from you. And I know plenty of churches preach that too, that if you can't have kids, God is not shining down on you. Like, they certainly imply that message if they don't say it directly. So yeah, it's bad for that reason too. Get millions of dollars from your rich dad and call it a small multi-million-dollar loan. Step 2, run multiple businesses into the ground and have daddy bail you out. Step 3, monetize your cult of personality. Step 4, become president. I assume that's how this works now. Yeah. All right, I'm jumping to a different story. Got a couple more for you here, and then I'll call it a night. Okay. I may need some help here for those of you who live in Maryland. There is a county called Wicomico, Wicomico, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. So until someone corrects me in the comments, I'm going to call it Wicomico. But when the Wicomico County Council in Maryland held a meeting a couple of months ago, one of their county commissioners, one of their council members, his name is James Wynn. There is a section of the meeting where council members are allowed to deliver whatever they want to say. They can just say what they want. The floor is theirs. It's not a vote or anything. And James Wynn was very disturbed because the day before they had this meeting in September, Charlie Kirk had just been killed. And I don't think James Wynn was taking it okay. He was very disturbed by this. All right. And so he used the public comment portion of that meeting to whip out a copy of the Bible and insist that everyone needed to buy into the Jesus myth. And what did that have to do with his work on the city council, county council? Nothing. He just had a platform. And so he decided the best way to use it was to tell Jews, Muslims, and atheists that they needed to convert. Now, this was a long, rambly speech he made, and I'm not going to play the entire thing for you. But one of the things he pointed out was that after 9/11, which he invoked, after 9/11, quote, we saw a huge coming together of people, families, people loving on each other, which I just want to point out is so not how that happened after 9/11. He's ignoring the rampant bigotry against Muslims and so many other brown people. And then he insisted Charlie Kirk was a hero because he put God first, he put the Bible first, he put Christ first in everything. Which, no, that's not why anyone remembers Charlie Kirk. We remember Charlie Kirk because he said a lot of racist things all the time. Anyway, let me play you a little bit, a minute of what James Wynn said.
A lot of people were saying he was a political commentator. Yes, I would agree with that. But foremost, he put God first. He put the Bible first. He put Christ first in everything. And if you watch and listen to him, that's exactly what he did. And I brought something important here today, that we've got some people in this audience and in this council that are trying to figure out what is going on in the world. Why is this happening? Why the craziness, right? I hear it up here. And I'm telling you, it's because people are falling away from the Word, from Christ. And it's actually, everything's right here. The answers. This is truth. You've got the beginning, you've got the present, and you've got the ending written right here. And I just want everybody to really think about this. I know not everyone here is a Christian, and that's okay. I'll pray for you. And, there's only one way. There's only one way. And that's through Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Yeah, don't you feel better already? By the way, I am told it's pronounced Wicomico. Sorry about that. Wicomico County. Anyway, what did any of that have to do with the city's business? Absolutely nothing. It was a waste of everyone's time. It was completely inappropriate, a fact that would have been obvious to everyone who was part of that council if he broke out any other book besides the Bible. Not only, though, did none of the council members stop him or say anything about it, he only stopped speaking, and you would see this in the long version of the video. James Wynn only stopped speaking after a community member who was in the audience courageously called him out and walked out of the room. And I can't show you that because she didn't have a mic, so you can't really hear what she's saying. But she walked out of the room, and what I could make out that she said was, what we're seeing in government right now in the White House is not love. It's not love, and it's not the way Jesus talked. And then she left that audience, and that's when this guy stopped preaching. But here's the thing. The preaching did not stop when James Wynn stopped talking there. It turns out that if you look at the minutes of their agenda of Wicomico County, look at this. This is just a random one I pulled up from the beginning of October. But look right over there, right after they begin the meeting, what do you see? Opening prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. And if you listen to the video of what happened at this meeting. And like all the meetings, it's not just an opening invocation prayer where different members of the community give an invocation. Some of them might be non-religious, some of them might be Muslim or humanist or what have you. No, it's always the Lord's Prayer, a very specific Christian prayer. And at that point, you have this county council that is doing these religious invocations all the time. And now you have this dude calling attention to it by literally proselytizing in the middle of a meeting. All of that is why the Freedom from Religion Foundation just sent a letter not that long ago to this community. Here it is. This is from October 13th. But look down here. One community member reports that at the September 16th meeting, Council Member Wynn read from the Bible during his comments. Yeah, that's the video I just showed you. He first proselytized to attendees about the Bible, saying everything is right here, the answers, this is truth. He then went on to read multiple passages from the Bible and give his interpretations of them. He concluded by saying that I know not everyone here is a Christian, and that's okay. I'll pray for you. There's only one way, and that's through Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Like, that's a dickish thing to say to people who don't agree with your book club. I don't need you to pray for me. I'm doing fine, buddy. You're the one that needs some help. But look at this. They're not going after Wicomico County because of what Wynn said. They're going after them because of the Lord's Prayer. Look at this. We write to request that the county council respect the views of all constituents and attendees by ceasing beginning meetings with the Lord's Prayer and remind its members that proselytizing attendees is inappropriate and constitutionally concerning. And notice how they said that. The Lord's Prayer invocations, those are illegal. What James Wynn did is just inappropriate. And if all they did is what James Wynn did, there's probably not a legal case you could pursue other than to say maybe stop doing that because it's just inappropriate. But because they're doing the Lord's Prayer, they got a legal battle now. And if anyone wants to sue, there is a good chance anybody who sues them would win. And just a few weeks ago, the Freedom from Religion Foundation got a response from the county. December 31st is the date here, but look at this. Thanks for your letter. Go to the second paragraph. After consideration of the issues raised, the Wicomico County Council has determined that beginning in calendar year 2026, which is now, it will discontinue the recitation of the Lord's Prayer as part of the council's meeting agenda. The decision was made after consultation with legal counsel. So, wow. So here's the timeline as I see it. It doesn't seem like a big deal because they're just saying, don't sue us. We're not going to do it anymore, which is the right thing to do. But it seems like they were doing the Lord's Prayer all the time and no one locally raised a stink about it. So it just continued forever. And why would anyone know what happens at a random county council meeting? But then one of the council members is like, you know what I'm going to do? Charlie Kirk just died, so I'm going to use my time here to preach to everybody. And that was so out of line that it did draw people's attention. Not because what he did was illegal, but because they're like, wait, this dude just did that and he got away with it and no one said anything about it? I wonder if they do anything else religiously inappropriate at these council meetings. And Freedom from Religion Foundation figured out, oh, they do the Lord's Prayer at every meeting. Oh, we got them. And they sent their letter. And the lawyers for the county are like, oh no, they got us. And because James Wynn decided to break out the Bible to honor Charlie Kirk, because of him, they just got rid of the invocation prayers for everybody. It is, oh, chef's kiss. That is beautiful. I love when city councils, county councils end invocations. But the reason this ended is because the dude couldn't keep his Bible shut. That is glorious. And on January 14th, so just last week, the county issued a press release where they went into a little more detail about this. The decision was made by Council President John T. Cannon after receiving legal guidance indicating that the U.S. District Court for Maryland and the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit have ruled against council-led sectarian prayer, which is the thing we're doing. Legal counsel advised that any challenge to this precedent would likely require litigation through the Supreme Court level with no reasonable expectation of success. Fancy way of saying, our lawyers told us what we're doing is wrong and we're going to lose a case and have to pay a lot of money. So, let's stop. And then look at the next paragraph. It's beautiful. The issue arose after a council member read scripture from a Bible during council comments at a legislative meeting, which prompted outside legal action. They are admitting that Wynne is the reason. He took it too far, and now none of the Christians get to do what they want. I love it. Basically, they issued this press release saying, don't be mad at us. Either blame James Wynne for going too far or blame the atheists for writing this letter saying they're going to come after us. Just don't blame us for doing the thing that was totally illegal for a long time, even though we have lawyers who could have told us we shouldn't be doing this, but those lawyers suck, so they never told us to stop. Unbelievable. So thanks, James Wynne. Love that you're not smart enough to realize that what you're doing is wrong. That is incredible. I wanted to share one other thing with you, which is that when local media covered this story, the Wicomico County Council said they are considering replacing the Lord's Prayer invocation with other stuff. Fine, they can do that. But look, this is what the county executive said. County Executive Julie Giordano railed against the decision to discontinue the tradition of reciting the Lord's Prayer ahead of the meetings. We bent the knee for one person at the expense of 104,000 people, she said on a social media post. I don't think we would have been sued. We've looked at the legal ramification of having the Lord's Prayer at the beginning. It would definitely be an issue if we were forcing people to say the Lord's Prayer, but you have the choice. That is not what the law says. She is dumb. No, if you're saying the Lord's Prayer, there is an expectation that everyone is going along with you. It's part of the county minutes for the meeting. You can't impose your religion on people that way. And you can't ask people, if you don't like it, step outside. You would know that, Julie, if they were doing an Islamic prayer or a satanic prayer in its place. That's why you don't do invocations. But also, we bent the knee for one person. She makes it sound like one person was at the meeting and complained, and that's why we can't have nice things. No. A lot of people may have figured this one out, and you shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. And by the way, even if your county has 104,000 people, they're not all religious. I promise you, a good number of them are non-religious. But let's be honest, most people don't pay close attention to what their local governments are doing. And then Giordano, a Republican herself, went on to reply that the 5-2 Republican majority council could have pushed back. Yeah, they could have, and they would have been sued. She also praised Wynne for standing his ground and defended his use of council comment time to read from the Bible, which is what you say when someone wastes everybody's time because they don't actually want to do the work that the county elects them for. Anyway, if the council doesn't believe they're going to get sued, go for it. Go do the Lord's Prayer from here on out. Let's see how that plays out for you. I can't wait to see it. Because again, this is not some borderline case of church-state separation. This is a clear-cut overreach of what the law allows. And the lawyers, that's why their lawyers said, we need to stop this because we are going to lose. So good on those lawyers for figuring it out now. I think the problem with Giordano and Wynne and all those other council members who never said anything is that they are so used to Christianity being the default setting that they have no idea what it's like when anyone who supports church-state separation says maybe keep it neutral. They don't know what neutrality is like because they've grown up in a bubble where Christianity is the neutral perspective. And that's why people like us need to break them of that bubble. But anyway, that's why the prayers ended. That's why more people should speak up against religious zealots who are on these government panels, boards. Like, no one attending a government meeting should have to sit through a religious sermon, ever. And don't give the county credit for ending it. They didn't do it because it's the right thing to do. By their own words, they ended the Lord's Prayer because they worry that they're going to get sued over it and lose. That's not a moral reason for ending this practice. And maybe if one council member had spoken up when James Wynne broke out his Bible, they wouldn't have even had to deal with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. But no one had the courage to do that. So good on the citizen for walking out, and good for whoever for bringing it to the attention of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. All right, I will stop there. What question we have here? Whoops. Sorry. I don't know. I don't even know what that's about. I'll skip that. What else we got? Oh, thanks for becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate that. I never listened to Charlie Kirk, but understood the general idea of his viewpoints. But I was shocked at some of the things he did say that I wasn't aware of, including his statements on empathy. I'm assuming Charlie Kirk is not a fan of empathy, but also, you know, it was Martin Luther King's Day recently, so I'm sure you heard a bunch of Charlie Kirk comments if you were online, because he didn't think that should be a holiday at all. I know what he said about black pilots. I know what he said about flying in a plane with a black pilot. Like, he said a bunch of stuff. You don't need to, we don't need to praise him. What else we got here? I hope one day everyone appreciates separation of church and state. Is something I've been saying for 25 years. Haven't gotten there yet, but we'll keep working at it. I'm almost 10 minutes behind, and holy crap, that guy lying about Charlie Kirk is gross. Yes, he is. Oh, yes, thank you for bringing that up. I mentioned this racist bigot earlier who made a racist post about not taking communion, and people were asking what church he went to. And can you put that back up, Den? I want to make sure people see it. That's right. It's St. Elizabeth Roman Catholic Church in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, I got one last story for you. One moment. This should be a fast one. All right. I did not know that name. All right. In Oklahoma, a state senator, his name is David Bullock, he is trying once again to shove his religion into the law. And the way he's doing it is by sponsoring Senate Bill 1868, which I will show you right here. And Senate Bill 1868, look at letter A. Let's talk about what this would do. A teacher employed by a school district or a charter school in the state who presents instruction to students on the concept of biological evolution. If you teach evolution, you shall also provide instruction to students on the concepts of creationism and or intelligent design. So if you teach evolution, you got to teach creationism or intelligent design. That is what David Bullard, that is what David Bullard wants us to do. This is Bullard, for those of you who want to know. We're still doing this. It's 2026, and we are still having to discuss Republicans passing anti-evolution bills. And by the way, there's one other aspect here. Let me take you to Part B of the same bill. There's one other element to it before we discuss. Neither the State Board of Education nor any school district board of education, basically no one in charge, shall prohibit a teacher at a school from helping students understand, analyze, critique, and review in an objective manner the scientific strengths and weaknesses of biological evolution, creationism, or intelligent design. And that is a lot of words. Let me translate it for you. If a teacher says there are holes in evolution and it's a lot of scientists have questions about it, wink, wink, let me teach you creationism, the state cannot tell you that you are doing anything wrong. That's why that part is in there. So that's the bill. It's a bill so unscientific and so illegal, so wildly illegal, that even Oklahoma Republicans are not likely to take it seriously. And the reason I'm telling you that is because Bullard has been doing this shit for years. In previous years, he has filed bills to put up 10 Commandments monuments inside and outside the Oklahoma State Capitol. He wants to force children to learn about America's Christian heritage in their schools. He also promoted the idea of pushing the Bible directly in school before adding, like last year, that he didn't want some, quote, pink-haired person who doesn't believe in God to start trying to teach the Bible. So he wanted schools to teach the Bible, but also he didn't want atheist teachers anywhere near it. So the way he's trying to micromanage Bible curriculum in public schools is so illegal to the point where he wants to micromanage who's allowed to teach those classes. And none of those bills passed because even Republicans are like, this guy's an idiot. So that's the good news. But like, I want to show you the press release that this guy released because he wants to brag about these anti-evolution bill. Look at this. Senator David Bullard has filed legislation to restore balanced instruction in Oklahoma classrooms. Balanced. It's balanced because there's the right answer and the wrong answer, and we got to weigh them both. And he wants to promote critical thinking skills by ensuring students are not subjected to one government-mandated ideology about the origins of life. Yeah, evolution is just there because the government tells you to teach it, not because of the mountains of evidence and the entire scientific establishment saying, no, this is kind of the basis of everything. And look at this too. These statements. Oh my God, this dude. For far too long, this is my Southern accent. For far too long, we have clouded the understanding of where we come from and our origins as humans, says Bullard, a former history and government teacher. Good luck to those kids he had. For decades, we have taught fiction as fact. This guy believes in the Bible. And forced the theory of evolution on our kids. That ends now. They gotta be dumber. Senate Bill 1868 fixes this problem by putting both evolution and creationism in the classroom for students to learn. Notice how he ignores intelligent design there. Usually, you say intelligent design because you don't want to say creationism. This guy's bill is like, you could teach both. And now in the press release, he's like, nope, it's just creationism. I don't want to teach them not Jesus. I don't want to teach them not what Genesis says. This guy's very bad at his job. What else does he say? Do you want to hear my Southern How dare you? Gonna go back here. The ability to discern the truth about the origins of man is a critical step in our kids' education. The truth. They got to know the truth. Either we teach both ideas or we allow parents to teach their kids this important topic. We must also stop this indoctrination of our kids using a theory that even its creator openly doubted. First of all, both ideas? You think when it comes to the origin of life, there are just two ideas. The right one, evolution, and whatever Christians believe. There is no room in this guy's world for like other religions to have their own theories on how life existed. This guy thinks there's two theories, evolution and the one he just made up. And the other thing he says here, he wants to stop indoctrination. He wants to push the Bible in public schools. But apparently teaching science is indoctrination. And this last bit, like, its creator openly doubted it. Yeah, if you read what Charles Darwin said about evolution, he's like, I mean, I don't have all the evidence here. This is my theory. I am paraphrasing if you can't tell, because this is my Charles Darwin accent. But Charles Darwin is like, yeah, it's possible this evidence could overturn what I'm believing here. He actually said, this is the quote, I am quite conscious that my speculations run quite beyond the bounds of true science. Yeah, because he didn't have all the evidence backing up his theory. But guess what? In the years since 1850s, 60s, there's a lot of evidence, mountains of evidence, DNA evidence. Like, there is no evidence that shows evolution, the basics of evolution are wrong. All the evidence we have suggests that the idea of evolution explains how life evolved in the best possible way. That's it. Like this idea to say, well, Darwin doubted it. Yeah, there were no toilets around. There were no flushable toilets around when Darwin lived. There wasn't all the mountains of DNA evidence when Darwin lived. We didn't even know what DNA was. So, yeah, there wasn't the evidence. So, we had some skepticism about it. Who cares? In any case, so I did want to point you to one other thing here, which is that the National Center for Science Education, they wrote about this, and I just want to share with you what they said at the bottom here. This bill, the bill was introduced by David Bullard, who introduced legislation aimed at undermining evolution education in previous legislative sessions. Senate Bill 14 in 2019, Senate Bill 613 in 2021, Senate Bill 1871 in 2024. He's tried this 3 times. None passed committee. He couldn't even get those other anti-evolution bills past phase 1. And that's where this bill sits right now. So we'll see what happens there. I don't think this is going to fare any better. There was a similar bill I talked about that was recently filed in Arizona. But the reason this is going to fail, even though we are talking about a Republican-dominated legislature in Oklahoma, creationism has been a non-starter for the courts when it comes to science class since 1987. Intelligent design has been a non-starter in the courts since 2005. And all the euphemisms for holes in evolution and like teaching the strengths and weaknesses of evolution, they have gone absolutely nowhere. And that's because the courts have repeatedly said you cannot shove Christian mythology in a science class, no matter how much Ken Ham or some other creationist pretends it's secular truth. It doesn't belong in science class. So I guess even if this bill doesn't go anywhere, though, it is a reminder that creationism and intelligent design, no matter how you package them, they're not going away, and they're never about evidence. They've always just been a Trojan horse to sneak religion into public schools. Evolution does not have a viable alternative. And those things, intelligent design, creationism, are nothing more than theology. Just because Republicans want to sabotage public schools doesn't mean anyone should take their claims about, kids need a choice in science class. No one should take those claims seriously. Evolution is foundational to biology, medicine, genetics, environmental science, and undercutting it, like Bullard and his GOP allies want to do, it weakens students' ability to understand the world. It sets up Oklahoma students for failure. And it is not just deeply irresponsible, but it's really irresponsible in a state that is ranked what for pre-K to 12 education? According to U.S. News and World Report, Oklahoma is ranked 48. So this is not a state that has any business saying, we know how to do education correctly in our state. I don't know. Silver lining here is he will fail. And even if this bill were to pass, it would get shot down in the courts immediately. But the fact that it can even be proposed, the fact that Oklahomans elected this idiot to promote this type of awful legislation says a lot about who this guy is and how ignorant his voters are. This guy doesn't want his own constituents' kids to have a solid, accurate education so that they can go to high school, maybe go to college, and get the hell out of Oklahoma. He wants to indoctrinate them with his religious beliefs instead. All right, I will stop there. What questions we got here? 2026 and still submitting anti-evolution bills. Absolutely. Can't believe we're dealing with this. He wants to promote critical thinking skills by banning critical thinking. Yes, you see, Christian nationalists like to promote critical thinking by making sure you never have original thought. And whatever you think is true is not true because, if scientists believe something, why does that make it true? I have a theory about many things. We should also teach those in the classroom. The teacher could teach why creationism does not fit the facts, malicious compliance. So I have a thing about this. I appreciate what you are saying. I find it very funny. However, I think science teachers should not waste their time acknowledging just one religion's idea of bullshit. because you shouldn't waste any time on creationism for the same reason you don't waste any science class time explaining why some minority religion's origins myth is false. They're all false. All you say is, look, this is what scientists believe is true in terms of scientific, as far as scientific theories go. That's what you teach. You don't waste time telling them, let's not believe the following, because there's too much that could fit in that basket of bullshit. So you don't waste your time doing that. But I do agree, like, if this bill were to pass before the courts got to it, if you have to teach creationism, yes, I'm all for malicious compliance. That is the least Southern accent I've ever heard. I am deeply offended that you think this is not a Southern accent. It's close enough. That's the only accent I do other than Fundy baby voice. I have a theory that Oklahoma should be reclassified as a chronic condition. Thank you for that donation. I love it. I will tell Seth Andrews. All right. We are done, I think, for today. Thank you so much. I will see you next week at the usual time. And you may also get a bonus clip for a show, for a segment that I wasn't able to do tonight, but I will get to it soon. So I will post that on the channel soon. You know the drill. Support the channel. Go to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate that. And if you haven't done it already, go to friendlyatheist.com. You could do that for free as well. Thank you, Den, for helping me out tonight. I will see you all next week. Have a good one.